Okay, everyone, I'd like to welcome you to another one of the keynotes that we have today from Keith Reinhardt. And again, more fresh content. So we've been blessed that the speakers and presenters have been prepared to come up with fresh content, and there's been so many learning lessons for all of us during and post COVID-19. And Keith would like to share some of those with us today. And so I'm going to just hand over to Keith at this point and also say thank you very, very much to Fresh Address for being a sponsor. Without their support, none of this would have been possible. And I believe we may have another Irma to give away. So guys, don't forget to keep tweeting. Yeah, we'll hear from Keith now.
Great. Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here. And the show has been wonderful so far. We've been on since very early this morning and definitely a lot of very interesting learning. So it's been great. Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here. And the show has been wonderful so far. We've been on since very early this morning and definitely a lot of very interesting learning. So it's been great. I'm having a little bit of audio problem here. Sorry about that. I think it was because I was also logged into the show.
You did, yes. Close your hop-in window or silence your hop-in window, and then everything will be all good. So there's a little bit of feedback there. So if you just mute the your other tab.
Yep. Okay. Now it should be good. Yeah. Again, thanks, Andrew, for allowing me to be here. I think the show has been fantastic, and we're very excited to contribute. And I just wanted to thank everybody for being here today with me for my session about email data quality during a pandemic. I'm Keith Reinhardt. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Fresh Address. I've been here for about 5.5 years, and clearly the past year has been very, very unique, to say the least. And really, before I get too much into it, I know that for me, kind of levity and comedy have really, helped me through the past 9 or so months, helped me maintain some level of sanity. So I do want to keep this as light as possible, maybe make some jokes. My jokes typically are bad, but I'll make them anyways. But I like to say this, in light of the fact that it's been a very serious time for everyone, right? I don't want to make light of that. Obviously, 2020 has been tremendously difficult for the world. Unfortunately, too many people have gotten sick. Too many people have passed away. Too many people have lost their jobs, especially in our industry. So I just don't want to overlook that and come across as being insensitive. But again, I like to have a little fun too. Before I get too far into it, just a little bit about Fresh Address. A lot of you probably know the company, but in case you don't, we're an email marketing intelligence company. We've been around since 1999. We're a provider of proprietary data-driven email solutions for digital marketers. We've served over, I think it's 3,000 clients now, 25% or more of the Fortune 100, and we've processed about 16 billion email addresses since our inception. And we offer a variety of solutions that help marketers clean, protect, and grow their email databases. And that helps them avoid email delivery issues and essentially drive more revenue through email. And we do that with best-in-class technology, proprietary IP, a big knowledge base, and some very, very smart, dedicated people. So now that we have that out of the way, I just wanted to take a look at some really high-level takeaways from the past 9 months in this presentation. First and foremost, the pandemic had a negative impact on email data quality, and this created some problems for businesses and nonprofits. I do think that there are some good things that will come out of this, but that's the net there. I think another key consideration is the fact that we're not out of the woods yet. a lot is changing by the day, and we just have to keep that in mind, that we're not in the clear yet. And then last but not least, it's not all bad news. I think there have been some real advancements made in the email marketing world. Email's been a communication method that's helped businesses stay in business, that's helped people stay in contact. And, we've seen a lot of adoption and advancement. So it's not all bad. And when I look at the pandemic's impact on data quality, to kind of make sense of it in my mind, I look at things in 3 stages of impact. And it might be oversimplifying things, but it kind of makes sense to me, right? So we have this mid-March timeline, which I look at as stage 1, where more or less everything was closed, right? You could go to the supermarket, you can go to the gas station, you could do a few things, but everybody was essentially home. And then we saw kind of the fallout from that, just the constant flow of letters from our CEO. Here's our COVID response plan. Our business is closing. You can do curbside pickup. There was just that flurry of messaging and panic in the world. Then we got into, at least for us in the States in the Northeast, around mid-May, we started to have reopenings. Again, we saw kind of a new level and type of messaging around, obviously, reopenings, letting customers know that it was safe to come back, letting customers know that there were changes to the rules and regulations, things of that nature. And then I think right now we're in stage 3, which would be the new normal, which is kind of changing every day. And it's kind of some mixture of the first 2 stages and whatever happens next. It just seems like we're kind of constantly opening, closing, and changing things around. So again, like I said, we're not out of the woods. I'm up in Massachusetts. We're about 10 minutes away from Rhode Island. I just saw some news that they have the highest infection rate in the world. I know our governor in Massachusetts is starting to tighten things back up. So I think it's going to be, unfortunately, for a period of time, a lot of changing and shifting. So what we've seen thus far throughout the pandemic, some of the key trends, I think one of the most obvious is that email became the best and oftentimes only way to reach customers. A lot of businesses simply lost physical touch with their customers and donors. This email became pretty much the only way and the best way to get in touch with them. As a result, a lot of the clients that we work with got much more aggressive, right? They started going deeper into their database. They started emailing folks that may not have engaged in a longer period of time than they typically be comfortable sending to. We saw them send more frequently. And we also saw a lot of marketers get aggressive and maybe even desperate in some ways as they explore new acquisition sources. Even from my perspective, we did about a big conference, if not every month, 10 or so a year, right? So we were left with the situation where am I getting 50 or 60% of my leads? And we saw folks do some of the no-nos, right? We saw them buy lists. We saw them work with outside agencies that don't always deliver the highest quality data. So we saw that develop as a trend, which obviously has implications on data quality in the future. And some of the fallout associated with the pandemic and all those things that I just talked about in the past slide, we saw bounces surge big time, especially for folks who are serving the B2B marketplace. I know my email list over the end of March, beginning of April, we were just the bounce backs we were getting on our newsletter and some of our other communications were like something I've never seen before. Like some other folks mentioned, not even just from the standpoint of deliverability and inbox placement, but just marketers and our clients had a lot of difficulty standing out in the inbox. There was that period of time, like I said, where there was a letter from every CEO that ever existed. There were all in this together messages, unprecedented times. It just felt like we were getting hammered with the same messages, same themes over and over and over again at a very high volume. And that made it really, really hard for marketers to stand out. We noticed a lot of other quality issues that I'll get into in a moment. I just think anytime you have this major spike in sending and also this major spike in going back deeper and deeper and deeper into one's database to try to get messages out, try to keep your business afloat, try to drum up online sales, you're going to see that stuff. And, we always see the corresponding problems with your ESP, problems with blocking, problems with blacklisting, which ultimately lead to marketers generating less money through their email program than they could have if they did things the right way. And, jumping off my commentary about how we noticed invalid bouncing email addresses ramped up during COVID, it just sheds light on the fact that email churn is a major problem. So the statistic that we typically reference is 30% of the average list gets lost to attrition each year. That got ramped up quite a bit in a number of ways. We saw the email addresses that we scan that are labeled as a bounce rise about somewhere over 20% during the first 3 quarters. Obviously, that was a little bit higher and leveled off over time, from March through, a little bit further down the road. But we saw those invalid email addresses surging, and then we saw some of the other categories that would lead an email to bounce to just really skyrocket over that period of time. And then I think the other thing to keep in mind, in addition to just the normal churn, folks going inactive, email addresses bouncing, is that there are other bad addresses that are still a major problem. Again, when it comes to spam traps and the problematic stuff, definitely a massive spike at the beginning of all this. But, even that said, when it levels off, those problems still aren't going anywhere, right? And in a day and time where email may be a marketer's only mechanism or best mechanism for driving sales and getting in touch with customers and donors, these are still a major problem that we need to keep in mind. Again, like I said, there are many types of bad addresses. We talk a lot about bounces and the ones that just don't connect anywhere. And then there's kind of the whole other laundry list of bad email addresses that are deliverable, but can get you into trouble or, at the least just generate no volume for your company and your email marketing program. And they're all the usual suspects, right? There's the problematic email addresses, the spam traps, the honeypots, the frequent complainers, role accounts in some cases, depending on what your business model looks like, typos that are coming in through your website or your store if it's open, bogus email addresses, bad email addresses. These are all things we just need to keep in mind that don't do any good for us. And then some other interesting findings from the past 9 or so months that are interesting, at least to me. We saw disposable email addresses that we find, and again, we process billions of email addresses every year. Disposables rise 60%. I thought that was kind of an interesting factor. Obviously, everybody's home. People are checking their email more, have a little bit more time on their hands. I just thought it was very interesting to see that number jump so much as an indication that folks might be a little overwhelmed in their inbox, but they still might want your white paper. They might want your offer, etc. But they don't necessarily want to have a line of communication with you moving forward. Another one I thought was funny and kind of interesting is our bad language finding. Like I'm trying to think of one that's somewhat PG, but I think you get the idea. I know if you ask my wife, she'd probably tell you that my bad language increased maybe in the 30 to 50% range, but this is something we see that's normally pretty standard and level, and to see that jump, I think, indicates where most of our heads and hearts were at least through March, April, and May. We definitely saw an increase in the problematic addresses. So confirmed spam traps, suspected spam traps, honeypots, those types of address. We definitely saw a spike, especially early on. I think when everybody wanted to get their "we're closed" message, this is how you do business with us now, here's our COVID response plan, you're still going to get the same level of service, nothing's going to change except likely folks aren't in the office, those type of things. We saw that corresponding increase, and then we've seen that kind of level off more recently. One other interesting finding, at least from my perspective, was that we actually saw a drop in what we call frequent complainers. Others might call them squealers or other things like that. We saw that drop 3%. And if you had asked me and I had to bet money, I would think, people cooped up at home, getting inundated with email. We saw some of the stats from past presentations today about the number of people reporting that they got kind of email they felt was irrelevant based on COVID or other topics during the past few quarters. I would have definitely thought that that number would have been higher. So maybe that shows a little compassion on our part, or maybe we were just too busy focusing on other things. And then just wanted to take look at a couple ways that you can keep your business safe with all of these new things going on. And some of them are just kind of tried and true methods that we've recommended to customers since basically our inception. But I think one really important consideration is to set a quality standard and stick to it. As I mentioned before, people have gotten a little loosey-goosey with, in some cases, right, with their engagement metrics and what they'll let into their program, what vendors they're going to work with, essentially who they're going to trust. So I think it's really important to define what a clean quality email address is to your organization, and then hold every input source to it, regardless of what it is and who's telling you to send to the list. Another one is to have a process in place to kind of audit all points of entry or validate at all points of entry. It doesn't do you a whole lot of good over time if you're really, really good on your website forms, but your point of sale system, if you're a retailer, for example, isn't up to snuff, or maybe there are some holes in your call center. Maybe you're using, paper forms if you're a gym or a fitness center, or maybe even a retailer. And again, all external sources, wherever those are coming from. No matter how long you've been working with a company, no matter how much you trust them, you just want to make sure that everything is clean and problem-free before you bring it in. Because you could have, a handful, a bad email address. It doesn't take much more than one bad apple to spoil the bunch. So it's just something to be mindful of. Another key consideration is to really be careful with older segments before you send to them. I've said it a couple different times, and it's an area where we have folks come to us over and over and over again, typically, and even more so over the past few months, where they're running into problems with their ESP, they're running into trouble with these older segments. So just do whatever you can to gauge the quality of those. We have a free tool, 100% free. It's called Free List Check, freelistcheck.com. What it really allows you to do is you can upload a list of up to, I believe it's 5 million files, and get a report back. So you'll get sample data on bounces, but it will give you an idea of the percentage of the file that's just going to outright bounce. And then it will give you individual counts on, here are, you've got a list of 1 million, you've got 25 million spam traps, you've got this many bogus addresses, you've got this many disposable addresses. It will go through all the typical codes that we would show a client. You're just not going to get the actual results. So kreinhardt@freshaddress.com is a spam trap. It's not that level of granularity, but you'll have a high level view of what's going on with that list and what to do with it. And it's not necessarily that you're going to pay to clean it. Maybe you are, but maybe it's just a quick indicator of, I think I'll put this one back in the closet, and I'm not going to upload this into my email infrastructure. Another important consideration is just to monitor engagement and activity closely. A lot of the folks that we see running into trouble, again, are just sending to folks who aren't engaged and are no longer interested in receiving their email. So it's just a good thing to keep in mind. Again, what I like to say jokingly, somewhat not always so jokingly, is to trust nobody. So really vet lead gen vendors, acquisition vendors, vet them carefully, look over them with a magnifying glass, get into their practices, get some client referrals, find out how they do what they do, and then, really analyze the data that they flip back to you. And then here's just a quick example of precisely what not to do and precisely what we see almost on a daily basis. So we see these companies go deeper into their file than they would have never dreamed of doing in 2007, 2008. There's no cleansing going on. There's no gauging of the quality going on. They're just kind of going for it, right? They need to make up their year-end number. They need to keep the lights on. They need to keep their employees sitting in their cubicles or working from home. So they just go back, very, very far. Then they run into the same problem. They get into jail with their ESP. They're not happy. They're having some issues getting into the inbox. And then what we see a lot of the time is the standard approach is, let's just keep culling this list down. Let's just keep reducing the size until you don't have a problem anymore, right? We're not necessarily removing the bad addresses. We're just continuing to chunk out more and more subscribers, right? And then the client at the end of the day is losing a bunch of money, a bunch of email-driven revenue from those good email addresses that are getting thrown out. We've seen instances where clients are very clear about the segments they're uploading, and they can kind of just hack out the super old ones and not have a problem. But again, I think it's just more of a reason to spend a little more time focusing on quality before you start sending out campaigns. And especially this time of year, nobody wants to get blocked, blacklisted, have inbox placement problems right before the big holiday push. And, if there's any silver lining here, I think that even though there's a lot of negative in what I just relayed, it's definitely not all bad news. I think as an industry, email progressed rapidly in a really short period of time. We were on a webinar a week or so ago, and the statistic that I heard was, e-commerce revenues, for example, have grown to levels that were estimated to hit in like 2024, 2025. So email's definitely filling that void. Email's definitely advancing. I think as an industry as well, we're definitely advancing. I'm seeing just a lot of folks who either weren't typically leveraging email start to, fitness centers, mom and pops businesses, houses of worship, other entities that could typically survive without an email program now have one. Great for the industry. Also, a lot of companies that kind of dipped their toe in the water and used email on a real limited basis have been forced by necessity to really dig in and get familiar and ramp up their programs. We saw record Black Friday online sales this year, which I think will change the landscape moving forward. And I think also at the end of the day, email kept a lot of businesses afloat, kept them in business, kept them in communication with their clients and donors when they wouldn't have been able to otherwise. So there's definitely some good stuff going that benefits us all moving forward. So just a high-level recap. Obviously, COVID created some new list quality challenges and kind of ramped up some of the existing ones. Email and digital marketing, e-commerce definitely progressed rapidly in a very short period of time. And there are lots of quick wins that you can employ today to protect your email program. And not all of them cost you money. And that is all I have for my presentation. I'm happy to field any questions from the audience if there are some.
Awesome.
Hey, Keith, it's Andrew. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so thanks for a great presentation. I'm sure there's probably likely to be a few questions. They might pose them to the next panel as well. So I think they're ready to start shortly. And I'll just check the main chat room here in case anyone's got any burning questions. No, everyone's dying to here's a sample report Keith mentioned. People are providing out links, and so you've been supported throughout your presentation by people in chat who knew what you were talking about already, and the rest of the team at Fresh Address are waiting to go with their panel. So none of the delegates need to go anywhere. We'll go offline shortly and they'll magically come online. There might be a 1 minute break for the delegates, but it's just while we switch studios and things and go live. Thank you so much for your time, Keith, and for putting that presentation together at the last minute. I know that there was some others that were supposed to do it, and then it landed on your plate, and you did a marvelous job, and we'd love to host you again and maybe bring you into a panel next time and get you involved in some of these discussions and conversations that everyone's having as well. Thanks again for the support from Fresh Address, and looking forward to working with you lots more in 2021.
Likewise. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Cheers. Thanks, Keith. Take care.